Hey, this is Patrick again. I'm with Scent Control Outdoors. We're out here doing some footage here. Food plots are coming soon. I mean, it's right around the corner. We've got your spring food plots are coming up, and then you got your fall food plots coming up after that. But we'll go over the spring food plots today, then we'll cover a little bit of the fall food plots. What we'll talk about here is food plot location is everything. When you go out there and someone says, hey, I want to put a food plot in, and it's open woods, and it's like the fields are giant right around beside it, and there's no cover. You know, you can put a food plot there and you'll draw deer in from the surrounding areas, you will. But if you want to see daylight pictures of deer, you definitely want your food plot in a remote area if you could possibly put it there, or put it in a wooded area that has a lot of underbrush around it, or it's a good bedding areas. Some other things we'll discuss here. When you go put a food plot in, you definitely want to make sure you get a soil sample. You can do them about anywhere. You can go to the FSA. There's one just about in any state or county. Like I said, you could find one. Take your soil samples in there. They usually don't charge you. They'll do it for free. Usually send them back. They'll send them to WU or someone, or whoever's local in your state. Soil sample is so important. The reason why is if your soil is not correct and your pH is low, you know, you're wasting your money on fertilizer and seed, and it's expensive. The time you buy your seed and you buy your fertilizer, you got a lot of money invested in this. So if you do a soil sample, it'll tell you how much, you know, lime you need, how much fertilizer you need, if you need potash, you need sulfate or boron, and there's so many things to take a factor in. If you get your soil sample back and it says everything you need there, I would advise you definitely spend the money and get it right, because you don't want to waste your money on seed and fertilizer and everything else if your pH and stuff's not right. The reason it's so important to have a food plot is when you have a food plot, you're going to draw deer in within 5 miles from where you've planted your food plot. Places that you never imagined. And that is absolutely awesome, because the nutrients that that food plot provides for them deer, it has minerals and vitamins in it. It has anywhere from 15 to 22% protein in these plants. I'll go over a few things here, what I've used and what I plant in the spring. I prefer, and what I like, soybean is great. And the reason why is you plant enough soybean, a small food plot, they'll mow the soybean down. I would recommend, you know, different kinds of clover. White clover does well. A lot of people mix white clover and red clover and crimson clover in your food plots. You can do anything from, you know, cowpeas are nice, because you can plant cowpeas throughout most of the summer actually, and they'll grow. They do pretty well, and they're pretty hardy. Your bigger food plots, I like soybean, and the reason why I like soybean is it's still standing. If they don't eat, you know, the leaves off it, they'll feed off the leaves throughout the entire summer, and it produces a lot of protein for the animals and everything they need there. And then late season, you still have a place to hunt, because it's still got bean pods on there, and them deer will absolutely devour it. When you get a real cold front in December and January, depends what state you hunt in. Some states are still in January, and it's a great source for them deer to come to, and especially they need it more than ever. Them bucks, they have been in the rut, and you know, they lost a ton of body weight. They need that extra protein, so they'll hit them soybeans real hard. And then and like I said, the good thing about different clovers too is for the fall, you know, when you're bow hunting in a food plot, that's what's nice too, is that clover that you plant in the spring, it's still there come fall, and you can actually leave it there, and there's certain kind of herbicides you can spray to control the weeds in there. That's a good thing about clover. Beans, like I said, they'll still be there too in the fall. You can plant corn. Corn is nice. I've planted corn multiple times. It does really well. Sorghum is great. It seems like it's pretty easy to plant. A lot of guys prefer sorghum. What's so important about food plots, I can't stress enough, is when you plant this, these deer need this more than ever, especially in the spring and the fall both, because in the spring is so important because they've had a harsh winter. If you had a lot of snow or you had a bad winter, you know, and you didn't have a lot of mass that fall, you didn't have a lot of acorns, you didn't have a lot of food source from that fall, they're really hungry, and they need the nutrition as much as they can get come spring. So if you have a food plot available, and it's going to supply so many things to them, it's going to supply protein, it's going to supply minerals and vitamins that they need crucially needed. They're going to have their little fawns coming on, you know, the does produce the milk, you know, all that's going to help that doe, and it's going to help that little fawn. And then all your bucks that you're wanting to grow and hold on your farm, it's going to keep them on your place. And that's the great thing about food plots. I'm talking within 5 miles away, you're going to draw deer you've never saw before. It needs everything you can imagine that can get out of your food plot. And there's so many things, the minerals and vitamins and everything you can imagine that comes out of the food plot that they need for that antler growth. And if you want to hold the mature deer and grow them bigger antlers, if you want big racks, all I can say is you plant the food plots, the deer will come. But like I backed up and said before, location is everything if you want to hunt that food plot, because you need cover around it. You need to be secluded the best you can. Any kind of little pockets where you have woods on both sides and the woods are sort of thick, or you got bedding areas close to it. One thing I definitely want to go over with is when you're putting a food plot in, you definitely want to check the soil temperature in the spring, because if the soil temperature is too cold, some of your stuff may not grow and you may have some problems with it. It needs to be between a 55 degrees, 65 degrees, 60 degrees, somewhere in that ballpark. If it's around there, you're good to go. Then go in there, brush hog. If you got a lot of weeds or underbrush, or especially for a new food plot, go in there and brush hog it down. Go in with the herbicide and spray it. Yeah, there's multiple different kinds of herbicides out there. I mean, there's Roundup Pro. I've used it. I've used a bunch of different brands. A lot of them do really well. I personally will spray it, a month before I'm going to actually till it in, just in case there's any kind of seedlings or anything that might have made it, and they might come back, and I might go back and check it 2 weeks later and say, oh man, I got to spray it again, and I'll spray it again to make sure all the vegetation is dead. Most weed killers anywhere from 7 to 12 days. Some of them are less than that. Some you can plant literally 2 days, 3 days later. Most of them are 2 weeks, but you read the label on the back of your weed killer there and it'll tell you. But after you spray it and you get it all sprayed and you're ready to go and it's all dead, go in with a rototiller or a disc or whatever you got that will available to you. You can drag it. It's whatever you got to do, but you definitely want soil seed contact. You want to make sure that seed gets direct contact with that soil, because if it does not, it will not do well at all. So you definitely want that seed to be touching that soil. A lot of guys will roll it in, some will drag it in. For your small seeds, like your brassicas, anything in your brassica family, turnips, kale, all of them, chicory, all of them, and they're a small seed. Clover's a small seed. I'll broadcast that seed throughout the whole entire food plot, and I'll do it right before a rain, and I'll make sure you watch the weather, and especially put that much time and money in it. I'd watch the weather and make sure you get a good rain to beat that down in the dirt. And if you till it up real good or disc it up real good and get it real fine, that rain will bust it down in that soil and it will actually bury it for you. I don't roll mine in because, I've been planting grass for a lot of years. That's what I do for a living. And I've tried every method you can imagine. And I just broadcast it over the soil. And the rain will put it where I need it. Now, other hand, if you're going to plant soybean, corn, well, you need a planter. That's the proper way to do it. You can get a no-plow system that you don't even need to plow the ground. You can spray your fields and then go in there and run that no-plow right through it, and it'll plant it right there where you need it. Or you can till it up and have one that you plant that you gotta till it up first and then run your planter through it. Last year I had to till it up, and then I borrowed a planter from a buddy of mine, and I planted a bunch of corn and stuff in Ohio. So this year I'm going to use a no-plow system because I can spray it and run a no-plow through it, plant your beans and your soybeans and stuff like that. So really prefers what you're going to plant. The clovers, you don't need any kind of equipment. Whatever you got available, it will work great. Now, after you put your seed down, you definitely want to put your fertilizer in there. You need to see what they recommend. A lot of things are different. Some are 13, 13, 13, or triple 16, or triple 17. Some are triple 15. All of them have their preference, what they prefer. Now, if you plant alfalfa, now alfalfa is different. You don't need as much nitrogen, but you'll need a higher percentage of sulfate and a higher percentage of potash, but not as much nitrogen. Now, with corn and soybean and stuff like that, it's a little bit different. So you'll have to really determine what you're planting, what you need. Then if you get Roundup Ready corn or you get Roundup Ready soybean, what's nice is you can actually go through there with a sprayer and you can actually spray your herbicide directly right on top of your soybean and right on top of your corn, and it won't affect it at all because it's Roundup Ready. And what that means is the herbicides won't kill the plant. It'll kill all the weeds in between the rows, and then your soybean and your corn don't have to compete for the nutrients in the soil, because the herbicide killed all the grasses and all the weeds in the rows. So you don't have to bother. So that is nice. You don't have to bother with worrying about killing your plants. Now with clover and stuff, there's actually certain kinds of herbicides you can use to actually spray your clover fields so the weeds don't choke it out and overcome your food plots with the clover. So that's something you have to look into there. There's different kinds of herbicides for clover. It depends what you prefer. You know, Whitetail Institution, they have one for whitetail clover that they prefer. I've used different brands over the years. They work really well. So if you're going to plant them, I would advise you to look into what you want to spray them with. Now, when you plant these, after it germinates and it starts, after that first rain, it germinates. That's why the rain is so important when you actually go in there and you plant this food plot. It's very crucial that you're going to get rain shortly after you plant this food plot. Because if you get a 15-minute rain and it rains on that food plot, and them pods, them seed pods, they open up and they start to germinate, and it don't get any more rain but 15 minutes, just enough to get it wet for them seeds to germinate, well, what happens is that hot baking August sun or the hot baking early spring sun on the food plots you planted, it bakes and kills them seedlings. Because when they start to germinate, they're very vulnerable and they will die. So if they don't get, you got 2 weeks of no rain after you planted, after you got a 15-minute rain for them to germinate, they're going to die. And then you have to go back and replant your food plot. Because that's happened to me more than once. Last year, I had a tough year. It rained enough to germinate my seed, and it was 90-some degrees for 3 weeks and kill my food plot, and I had to replant it. So it's very important. And after that germinates and it starts to grow, then every 45 days you want to fertilize it. That's very important. What's great about the spring food plots is after you go in there in the spring food plots and say the deer has just mowed down your spring food plots, and you plant a soybean or you planted corn or white clover or alfalfa or whatever it might be, and we use that same field. What's great is you can go in there and brush hog that down, go in there and you can rototill it in, and you can plant your brassicas, rape, chicory, kale, I mean, a lot of things. Anything in the brassica family is wonderful. That's what I use. I prefer, and I use every year. I've had great success with brassica, kale, chicory, rape, and turnips. I love it. I swear by it. I mean, you'll never have a deer in, say, in a food plot here that had this grass in it. People put hay in it, and you'll put a food plot with the mixtures I just told you about, and it will be loaded with deer. And what's wonderful is when you get the first frost, the sugar content comes up in the leaves of a lot of them brassica plants, which makes them really attractive to the deer. The deer absolutely will mow it down. So, and that's what's wonderful is usually the first frost is right around bow season. So it's great. You've got all this stuff out there planted, and then man, they'll just go in there and them deer will be in there constantly. And the reason I like that mixture is the kale, you know, it does really well when it starts getting really cold. Your turnips do really well. The bulbs on your turnips, you know, they get pretty good size. And what's wonderful is them turnips, a lot of times, they don't eat them until December and January. All the way into February, I've had them digging my turnips up in my food plots. So you have a variety of food. You have your brassica plants and your chicory that they start eating and hitting pretty hard during bow season before it gets really cold. And then your kale is pretty hardy to the cold weather. It's got to be a lot colder to affect the kale. So that lasts a little bit longer. So they got that. And then they got the turnips. So now they've got a food source almost until March, which is outstanding. That's why I use that mixture. It's great. And what you do is you go in there and put deer cameras all over that, because now you've got a food source that these deer are going to, it's going to attract deer from miles away. I've had neighbors say, man, I ain't seen that many deer this year. And I don't have the heart to tell them, I put a big food plot on my farm and I brought them all to me. So that's why it's so important to have food plots. It is outstanding. So if you have never planted food plots, try it. And because I'm going to try to cover everything I can to help you guys. Soil samples and what to plant is critical, and location is everything about having them there at daylight to actually shoot them. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope I could help you as much as I possibly could there. If you're interested in us coming to your farm and your land to show you what locations to put food plots or how to do them and anything about them, we even actually put them in for customers, and we'll come out and show you the locations to put them at. I hope I could be a huge help here. Please subscribe to me and like it, and look me up on Facebook and Instagram, and you can message me through there if you're interested for us to come to your farm and help you out. Thanks again.